This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. You're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So this evening, here to look back on Galway's draw against Tyrone. They left it late in the end, but Shane Walsh's free proved to be the difference as Galway get a point in the round 5 Allianz Football League game against Tyrone. I'd like to say a big thank you to our new sponsors of the podcast, Hoare Chartered Accountants. A big thank you to Eddie and all the team there for coming on board as sponsor for the next few months. Maurice, before we jump into Galway's draw with Tyrone at the weekend, a couple of bits unfolded in the club scene. The big one really, Owen Gallagher leaving Mike Cullen, going back to his home club in Antrim, being some servant for Mike Cullen over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely deadly. Just an unbelievable line breaker. A fella who, when they were down a lot of bodies. I remember Paul, I was out at they played G and they played on a
Mm.
down in a league game last year, and it was not their main core, but he was there just fighting for every single ball and going absolutely nuts when they were losing. And just the type of fella that when you get a transfer like that, exactly what you want out of it. A guy who completely empties himself every time he goes in there. No, I don't think this was a shock. There were rumored throughout last year that he mentioned he was going to give it one more year, that he actually wasn't. I don't think he was living locally. He was traveling up and down. So it's to be expected. But geez, when he was there, he left his mark. That's for sure.
Yeah, even with that, he obviously went to college in Galway and then went into Mike Cullen for a few years. But to go into Mike Cullen and then get the experience of playing for Galway, and even last year is probably one of the best footballers in the club championship.
Yeah, and like take such a phenomenal thing like that. It was said a lot when he was in with Galway. Owen played against Galway for one of Park's last games against Antrim, and the league they played against each other, and then he obviously came in under him as well. So, yeah, look, it was a brilliant thing. I mean, they have a lot of players like that. They're a really athletic, really rangy team that, from what we saw against, I don't know if you remember the Monterey game when Killian Gallagher from Donegal came in and was absolutely brilliant that day. And you're like, geez, what are they breeding these lads? Like, how do they get this kind of player so often? So, they have guys who will pick up that mantle, but for what he gave them, it was absolutely brilliant.
He's going to be a big loss for him now, isn't he?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. There, a lot of the, I think you're starting to see that Mike Cullen team was in a bit of a transition anyway. And that when Carl took over, you're starting to see a lot more of those 19s come in, and I actually saw them play a challenger recently, and Fionn McDonough was brilliant, and his younger brother was playing. Did Cox in the corner, who seems fairly sharp as well. So you've got a kind of a younger core of players who've started to come into it too. So their depth is still savage, like up there with some of the best in the county. So geez, they're going nowhere, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been interesting over the last few weeks. Been posting up to different managers, club managers, who's involved with who, and a lot of people have been interested about it. But the big one, obviously, Kerfin, Gary Delaney's obviously confirmed his management team over the last few weeks. Alan O'Donovan and Craig Higgins going in. But the two big ones here, two outside men coming in here with Gary Delaney, Jerry McGowan, obviously, a lot of work done with Roscommon and Clare and Tula Strand as well. And Declan O'Keefe, former Kerry keeper, joining the backroom team as well.
Yeah, I know Jerry a small bit from, I did a gig with him, a live podcast last year, and would have spoke to him after that as well. And I know, he's Jerry's been involved in some very successful teams. Like he was in Turleshan and did obviously a phenomenal in terms of what they went on to do there. He got Boyle pretty close in Roscommon. I think he was involved in Gary Moore a bit as well. Just a really, really sharp guy. I wouldn't be surprised if there was intercounty teams who were maybe talking to Jerry when all these management tickets were coming together in the off season there to see was that necessarily an option. So he would be that kind of caliber of a coach, like a really deep thinker, a really engaging guy, somebody who probably knows the Galway scene very, very intimately. I think, could be wrong about this. I'd say Jerry probably trained with Galway under Jono while
Okay.
he was based in Galway at the time. So he would know the scene very, very well, obviously. So yeah, like that's brilliant. Gary Laney going in there as well is obviously. is interesting, from a bunch of different reasons. What he did with Dunmore was fairly phenomenal. So yeah, like I mean, particularly intriguing. I think it's hard for no more than anybody. Clubs are finding it difficult at the minute. You're down a lot of bodies. And the main thing is like, what are you necessarily planning for? Like, we're talking. What is it here early on Tuesday? If we hear about what rule changes came in the Football Review Committee meeting last night, for example, if there was a 12v11 was allowed next year, what do Carfin do in goals? I think it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
If the 12v11 isn't there, there's no question. Like Bernie is absolutely one of the best goalkeepers in the country, and now maybe with the 12-11 he would have been anyway. But the difference it makes for clubs trying to plan this stuff is fairly considerable. Like so, I think it's too hard, very hard to get a tactical sense or any of that at this time of the year. Right now, it's just about like our lads training consistently. Are they getting together? Are you starting to get fit? That kind of thing. And because the reality is, we have no idea like what the first league games are going to look like, what the championship, what the rules that we'll actually be playing under. It could look drastically different.
I think though, particularly when it comes to club level, the rules are going to be significant. Particularly if you look even at inside forwards, like there's going to be some clubs that these rules will suit them, and some that are going to have to change a lot.
They will. No, like the first thing I just this week actually for work I was looking into what are clubs doing to help with the implementation of the new rules. I think the Galway referees met last Thursday. There was a kind of a testing thing where they're doing. I think there was a night in the Connemara Coast and there's another night. It's in the Ardree this week for coaches for an education night for around the we're not supposed to call them rules, the enhancements that are coming down the tracks. So everybody's trying to get the grips with it. I think the big one, I'll answer your question in a second about tactically. The big one is going to be the implementation of it. And I do think I, there's a bit of talk maybe our other counties looking at that they'll mandate you'll have to have a lines official with the referee to help them for league games, for example. If that's an option for senior league games in Galway, I think but I ideally would look to invest in that and just give them help because it's so hard. Geez, Paul, like the Mouth Challenge games, one thing you notice about the referees now, their body position is completely different because in a lot of situations they have their back. If we're attacking into the goal, they have their back to the goal and they're looking up the other way to try and monitor the 3v3 as well. So it's such a physical thing when you see it there in front of you, just how they have to basically contort themselves to try and get by with all of this. So yeah, like if they have,
Particularly for club league games, though, that's where it's going to be
yeah,
such a
but I
challenge.
just they need help. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and fingers crossed that everybody realizes that and it's we're able to deliver it. But definitely, they need like fairly significant assistance to make sure that they're able to enforce all this sort of stuff. And then maybe I'd say the first couple of league games could be pretty fun now. In fairness, there might be a bit of a cultural shift, no more than it was in the inter-county game that you saw lads getting pinged for not handing the ball back or the centre, that kind of thing. I'm sure that's coming down the tracks, and people will just have to realise a bit of short-term pain for long-term gain.
So just quickly on the club managers for people who haven't heard it. So Anna Down, Norman O'Brien is in charge for second year. Gary Delaney takes over Kerr Finn. Cod Clancy remains with Mike Cullen. Cosmo Gilmore remains with Berna. Owen Cannon and Dara Leonard come into St. James's as joint managers. They take over from Barry Downey. Owen Godwin is the new Milltown manager. Sátán McCara, Finian Hanley remains in charge there. Dunmore McHale's the manager there this year is Dennis Fallon. Fergal O'Donnell of Roscommon takes over from Val Daly at Montbellion My Law. Dave Donlan remains in Toom Stars. Dermot Lee takes over Oughterard. St. Michael's have announced their new manager, which is Cody Kelly. Gay O'Brien remains with Clannan. Bunteroach remains with Monivea Abbey. And then there's a bit of a switch over. The Leicester Moor manager from last year, Philip Neary, he's gone to Clare Galway there. And then the Oughterard manager from last year, Alan Murphy, he's gone to Leicester Moor. Uh, on that whole, Morris, on the senior managers, not many changes. Nine clubs stick with the same managers and seven new managers then.
Yeah, I've been burned by this before. I remember I say I was talking to you at one stage about isn't it great to see an element of consistency in Galway club management, and I think I just realize now these things just go in cycles. That I will be talking to you next year about a massive churn, I'm sure, and that's just the nature of it. So I think it is so beneficial in every single sense to have consistency in management. I know it in Bern, like how delighted the lads are to have Cosy back again. It definitely is just from a bunch of different reasons, like that to have that an element of consistency and lads being exposed to it. Do you know what I think? And we might talk about this later. I think it's remarkable when you look at Galway and the way they develop lads. Like, do other management get the chance to do that? Galway played Roscommon in a development squad for Galway, sorry, played Roscommon in an FBD final last year. I don't know if you remember, they were hockeyed by 18 points.
Yeah.
Three of the lads that in that game started at the weekend for Galway. So, like, do other managements persist with a development squad, bring in lads to that thing, and then allow them the exposure, come up, take your chance. And three of the boys who played in that FBD game started, or not played against Tyrone last Sunday. Like, I think
Jack O'Neill, Keane Darcy, and
Daniel O'Flaherty,
Daniel Fardy. Yeah.
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 Uh, I think it's a real testament to management. Like one Galway have an unbelievable ability, like a phenomenal ability to find like a unpolished gem and turn them into a diamond. Like find guys with high ceilings, get them into the environment, and just watch them flourish. Like I'm talking about a Keane Darcy, a John Maher, a Fitzy, Sean Fitzgerald. They're just an unbelievable ability, very like athletic players, and get so much football into them and make them thrive. And that same thing is true in club. Like if in club football, if you can get a bit of consistency in management and allow that process to go, it is definitely preferable. So I know a couple of teams might have been slightly frustrated that their appointments were a bit later in the year, but there still is more than enough time to have a very successful 2025.
Exactly, yeah. And they just on the intermediate before we move on to analysing goalies draw. On manager yet to be confirmed there. Manus Brannock obviously stepped down after the All Ireland success. On Spidale, Mike Dunn. In Caltra, Gabriel Naughton remains in charge there. Barry McCabe takes over from Neil McHugh with Caltran. Ger Butler is back with Clifton for another year. Curfin, second team, yet to announce manager. Damien McHugh is over Courtney Shamrocks. Kevin Brady is over at Glenamaddy. Michael Jordan is over Kilconnelly. Kieran West is the Kilkerran Clonbur manager. Kevin Murphy is with Menlaw. Paddy Moran is the new Michael Brannock's manager. Jerry Fahey is with Ormore Mary again. And Ilan and Stephen Joyce returns there again. And John Fitzmaurice is with St. Brendan's. And Barry Shea is the St. Gabriel's manager again. So they are the intermediate managers. Galway's draw, Morris, on Sunday, 118 apiece with Tyrone. But just first off, looked like some occasion in Tuam Stadium on Sunday.
I'm so glad you started there. You've nailed, yeah, absolutely nailed it. It was the thing I walked out the gate saying to myself wasn't that just deadly? Like it is just so real and raw and a place that is prime for nothing other than football. Like the pitch is great, stadium still needs a bit of work, but it absolutely serves it. It's perfect for what you want it to be, the stuff that matters, and that's just the game. Like the atmosphere around beforehand was. Oh, it was just deadly, Paul. Like
Yeah,
real wild and raucous. And you came in I actually came in the other side, the town end. But up the other gate there was a full band of drummers, just absolutely.
yeah,
So like you're walking in the gate, and you think, is the roof hopping here or what's going on? You had absolutely no idea what the noise is. And then just everything about the day, like an absolutely enormous crowd, a crowd so big I'd say they're nearly afraid to announce it. Like it was, the ground has its own issues in terms of the capacity that it can handle, but it was just brilliant to see the color of it and the noise that was there and every small element of it. The Corfin and Tuam under 11s play it at half time and the usual thing that they do at half time. But they listed both panels in the match program. Like it's a place that if you love Gaelic football, it's the place for you. Like that's the everything about it. So yeah, it was just brilliant. Really, a really enjoyable day. The finish, then obviously the noise from the stand when all that commotion was going on was particularly present, and I know a lot of people would have had legitimate concerns that maybe was all these new rules going to sterilize the sport? Like, were we stripping kind of a fundamental part of emotion where we want people to be able to go absolutely nuts? Like, we want to see the passion and emotion that is embedded in Gaelic football and is a very important part of it for me. And it's still there. Like that, I left Sunday thinking you still have sidelines going daft and people in the stand losing the rag on themselves and mad swings and just a real kind of wild sense about the whole thing. So no, I really enjoyed the day from that perspective.
just on that, we'll start first. important for Galway to keep this unbeaten record intact. In some senses, they got out of jail, but they won't care. Like, still, when you look at this overall and where they are, still top of the division and unbeaten, it's still a big positive.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think if you're we maybe tend to get too caught up in results in the actual outcome of games rather than performances. But I would say if you look at the five performances now that Galway put together, they're very similar. You know, they're I didn't think they were outstanding against Armagh on the first day. I think there was a bit of a mix against Derry as well. Even against Mayo, I would have my own reservations about this result in that game and the actual performance. I think a lot of things, the reason that was as one-sided as it was because Mayo's discipline was really, really poor. Like they were letting 50-meter advancements, they were breaking the three up, and Shane was kicking 2 pointers for fun. So, I think Galway scored 7 2 pointers that day, but I mean, five of them were from frees or from advancements or whatever, and that really does distort the scoreboard. So I think there's been a level of consistency in what they're doing. You talked about Carfin earlier. A lot of what Galway are doing now reminds me of Carfin, like what they do when they're
On that, are you seeing Dave Morris's influence already?
100%, yeah, yeah, 100%.
What is it you're exactly seeing?
Just very generic stuff. What they do on their own kick out, the way they cluster outside the D when they're attacking, so they bring a lot of bodies out to effectively load of bounce passes, to create these 1v1s and break through. The way they press, Paul, is I do think they're the best team in the country that I've seen so far at doing this, which is that Shane dropped the shot short into Niall Morgan's hands. Immediately, they're all ball side. They're boxing off man to man everywhere. They're squeezing ball side on the other side of the pitch where there's no threat. They're all tucking across, cheating slightly, cutting the imaginary line all over the place. And they really, really get after teams in a very impressive way that you see a lot of times. It could be Paul Conroy. He'll actually leave his man. He'll be marking the midfielder on the other side, and he'll leave him because they're going to go squeeze and get a high press up. And that is just, and every time I see it, them do it, I say that is pure Carfin. Like it is something that they were. I know people like to talk about Carfin in possession, but out of possession they were deadly, still are deadly, and that is just classic them. So yeah, I definitely am like that. That really reminds me a lot of. As soon as the first time I saw them go after it really well, like really effectively, was against Mayo. They basically let Mayo go short to the cornerback. Immediately, everyone has a man. Paul Kearney comes up as an extra body, use the sideline to trap them. They actually win the sideline. Mayo go fast with the sideline, and Galway trap them again and win a 45. And they just do that exact thing a lot, like the way they get after teams high. And I just speaking just as a fan rather than a journalist or anything like that. I love to see that in football. I think it's so important that that element of the game is there when we talk about the new rules. We want to see contest for the ball. Like we want to see chaos and we want to see defensive teams have a chance to squeeze attacking teams because part of the problem in Gaelic football is that it's been easier to be defensive in possession. Like it's easier to go slow, hold on to the ball because it's so easy to control the ball. So if we see teams rewarded for what Galway are doing, I think it's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. So long-winded answer, but definitely seeing that it's making us mark. We spoke to Shane Walsh.
Yeah, his quotes are very interesting.
Yeah, well, I make this trite media point that I'm sure most people don't care about, but Galway have just been an absolute dream to deal with from a journalist perspective. I spoke to three different players after the game on Sunday, and I actually think just in the context of part of the reason, Paul, that you're hearing so many complaints from managers about the new rules at the minute, right, is because managers are the only ones who talk. So the pages are going to be filled with something. So if managers are coming out and complaining, that's what happens. So we would know in Galway that Johnny McGrath, who's an elite man marker, and Shane Walsh, who's a top tier shooting forward, love the new rules because we've heard it from them. But I don't think we heard enough nationally, and that's part of the problem. That's we don't. It would be really good for this process if we knew how players felt about it. But that's not the case in Galway. Galway have been great to deal with in that sense, and Shane was really interesting to talk to after the game on Sunday and made that point about having Dave Morris's influence. I thought the point he made about Park was a good one too. Like he made the
Yeah.
point that he thinks maybe people underestimate his actual football brain, and he would have seen it as a when he was playing on the pitch that he kind of had it worked out in his head before he's just went and did it with his feet. So yeah, like a lot of things he said were I think it's very clear to me that he's obviously in great form on the pitch. He's in good form off the pitch, and a lot of that I think comes down to something a lot of us don't necessarily appreciate enough, which is just the physical side of it. The like what can you imagine trying to tackle the injury and you're not being able to go at 100% last year, and then it has an impact on your performances, and then the analysis of your performances and all that kind of stuff. I'd say it's just very difficult to deal with. So it's very clear to me that uh, he is at full fitness. We know he's at full fitness because he's kicking frees off the ground, and Galway will be very grateful for that because that's what ultimately saves the day on Sunday.
On Sunday as a whole, do you think we got out of jail on Sunday?
Yes and no. But with it was 115 to 115 after Galway scored the penalty, and at that stage I was thinking, okay, this is probably a fair reflection on how this game has gone. But Tyrone will be sick, I'd say, for a couple of different reasons. Against the wind in the first half, they were very good, very, very good. Like got a lot of pressure on Galway. Galway did the usual thing. It was funny. I was watching the throw up happened at half time. Sean said they're going with the wind. Keane McManus, again, their strength and conditioning coach was watching this happen. Immediately turned, ran over to tell Park that they're playing with the wind. And the first player Park ran over to was Shane, obviously. So it's very clear what their tactic was going to be in the first half. They were going to absolutely go to town on 2 pointers, and they tried 12 times, but only kicked four. And at where Armagh were very aggressive around the arc without fouling, which was very impressive. So they got a lot of pressure on shooters there. And then, I mean, won a penalty. I thought it was a dubious enough penalty, to be honest, but they won a
Yeah,
penalty. And then,
I struggled to see what it was for.
yeah, so that aside, they missed that chance, which would have made a big difference at halftime.
Yeah,
And then, I think I read before this game, Niall Morgan had 0 from 5 shots, and he had three chances again in this game. Misses two 45s and misses a 2 point shot as well. Like they're leaving a lot behind them, but they still went in level at half time, and then got back up coming down the stretch at the end. And you were thinking, okay, this is, needs wants. Tyrone needed a win here more than Galway did, but we had that absolutely crazy finish, and so I don't think they got out of jail necessarily. But I mean, if it was a what would it have been, a 2 point loss at the end, I wouldn't have said that was unfair either.
on that, have you ever seen a finish like that? Because we're just looking and they obviously break that three-man breach and go, he can go out then for the 2 pointer. Shane takes it, he scores it, and it draws the game ultimately. But the finish like that was just pure chaotic.
Yeah, see, there's a couple of it's a very hard thing as a journalist. It's your job. You're supposed to be able to articulate what happened here. There's a couple of different things going on there. So that all started with the Galway penalty. So Brian Mannion comes on, helps create a penalty for Sean Kelly. Sean Kelly is fouled by Peter Tague, the Tyrone fullback, who gets a black card with 58 minutes played, right? So that's the start of it. Galway scored a penalty. Tyrone are down to 14. 5 minutes later, the match stops. Galway sideline is going nuts because Tyrone only have two up. Then the Galway sideline realise and the referee realise and Tyrone are adamant they only need to have two up because of the black card. So the referee stops it, realises he wasn't supposed to stop it. Match plays on. Then Matty Donnelly goes up and kicks a wonder 2 pointer, and now Tyrone are 2 points up. And Peter Tague comes back on. So Peter Tague is the fullback coming back on after his black card. So he goes back into defence. But because before that Tyrone only had two up, the third attacker also came back. So now they're defending their goal and they only have two up. So a member of Galway's management team spots this, runs over to the linesman to tell him they've only two up, they only have two up. And for some reason his mic isn't working apparently. So he can't tell the referee to stop the game. So the referee continues the game, and Galway win a free very close to goal. And Shane is getting ready. Shane Walsh is getting ready to go for goal from this free. Like Tyrone are packing the line. He's going to have to go for goal because it's the last kick of the game, and they're 2 points down. The linesman comes in, tells the referee about what has happened. So then it becomes a 2 point free. So Shane comes out, gets out to take it, and because of that big stoppage, where the linesman was coming in to tell the referee about what had happened, the clock was stopped. So, there's this new guideline where you could be punished if you take more than 20 seconds for a free. The clock wasn't running, so he could have taken as long as he wanted. The clock hadn't restarted because of all the drama that had come before it. So, long story short, I have never seen a finish like that in Gaelic football, but it was very entertaining to watch it.
Yeah, even the finish like that, and it's some strike by Shane too to equalise the game.
It was unbelievable. Like into the teeth of that wind. He actually said that one of the things that is best about the fact that he tore his quad against Mayo in the first round of the league last year. He basically didn't strike it free off the ground after that again. But being able to strike off the ground into the winds, you can keep it slightly lower. The trajectory on the ball is that bit better, suits him way more. So it was a phenomenal strike. Really, really impressive. He actually scored the best thing he did in that game. I thought he scored a point into the wind. Niall Devlin, as good a job as I've seen man marking Shane Walsh as we've seen this year, did really well in him right until the very end of it. He gets isolated one on one on the wing and just kicks a brilliant point at that stage, and then obviously kicked the 2 pointer into the wind as well. So yeah, his striking is on it at the minute.
Overall, do you think a draw was a fair result?
I do. I think, yeah. Like I do think Tyrone will be sick, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to be on top of this stuff. It's very easy to say that when you're sitting in the stand looking down at, like, when in the middle of it, and there's a million different things going on. It's not easy. But I do think on the basis of the fact that they weren't able to close it out the way that they wanted, that it was probably a fair reflection on the game.
On some of the players who got their opportunities, and you talk about James, Jack O'Neill really did take the opportunity presented to him at the weekend, finished with 2 points, first start for Galway as well.
Yeah, he was absolutely excellent. A very similar example of what I talked about earlier in terms of a guy coming into a setup and really elevating. I actually remember I was at the game when his brother Sam had that really horrible knee injury in the quarterfinal of the club championship, and so he was obviously carted off early on that day. But Jack O'Neill thundered into the game after that. Like, had a really stood up that day, and I was like, okay, there's something really is about him. And then a couple of things he did at the weekend, but like he's winning kickouts. He caught a mark from so Galway played very interesting the way Galway were setting up attacking wise. They played Paul Conroy as a full forward basically, and he set up Jack O'Neill's mark. Jack so was outside the arc, kicked the ball inside to Jack, who caught it. I don't know if he realized originally that he had to take the mark, so there was a bit of a stop. But then eventually went and he kicked another point in the second half as well. But a lot of what Galway were doing, you saw this with Sam O'Neill as well. They're playing like somebody we wouldn't necessarily recognize as an inside forward, very close to goal, who has to be marked, who's probably a big physical presence anyway. So they'll be close to goal, and they're bringing a lot of their shooters out around the arc. So it seems counterintuitive. Like, you're bringing your best forwards away from goal. You're playing guys who mightn't rack up as big a total close to goal, but they're doing that for a reason. Like, those big physical presence on the edge of the square, they have to be marked, and that creates space for Shane Walsh to go to town on 2 pointers outside the arc as well. So they've clearly put a bit of thought into the way they're setting up here, and it's working. Like, it is definitely working. So yeah, I mean, I thought as debuts go, it was really impressive.
Is he a player now you expect to push on and see more game time throughout the league?
I think so. Now the competition is,
Yeah.
Sean Kelly said to me afterwards, it's like a war to get into our 26, uh, which I think is a fair reflection that I think Shane said as well, did he, that it's the strongest squad he's ever been a part of, and you definitely get that sense both in terms of the lads who are coming back, and then the lads being available as well, which is a massive thing as well. So when you get your chance like he did, and the fact that you put up your hand, it feels like that's something that registers with management definitely. Like, and they, as I say, they have just a phenomenal ability to find players who are good players and just make them, exceptional. Like really, really elevate them. I look at a guy like Keane Darcy. Like, Keane Darcy was a midfielder, and he was an absolute physical specimen, which made him a real kick-out target. But in 2020, he played 9 games for Park that year. He started the Connacht final, I think, against Mayo, and was taken off after 23 minutes, and doesn't play again until 2024. So that's it. 2020, he's gone. Comes back in 2024, as I mentioned, played in that development for that development squad in the final against Roscommon, and just goes from strength to strength to strength to strength. Like, his every time he's called on, he was our second best kick-out target last year after Paul Conroy, who won Footballer of the Year. He comes in an All Ireland final. Sean Kelly was supposed to start. He's a late inclusion. He's over talking to Anne Marie Kennedy, the psychologist, before the game. he's walking around in the parade and he writes affirmations on his wrist. He's quoting these affirmations back to himself as he's walking around in the parade, and he scores 3 points from play, like as a an unbelievable game in an All-Ireland final. Did anybody see that necessarily coming? So their ability to get lads into that environment and then just slowly develop them is not slowly actually that happened relatively quickly, but just get really consistent development is phenomenal. So I like have we seen the best of Jack O'Neill? Absolutely not. I think he'll improve tenfold, and he was very good at the weekends. But by being in that environment, and that's a real credit to management that you can do that with players. It's very the easy part, Paul, is finding good players. We can all do that. Like we can all point out the guy that has a, he has something about him. But making players great, like getting them up to thing, that's the hard thing. Like that's there's been countless hours of sports science put into talent development and talent ID and what goes into all of that. And whatever Galway are doing, it's very clearly working.
It's only really Tomo, Damien, and John Daly to come back into it now.
Yeah, Damien was knocking around afterwards actually on Sunday and looked happy and seemed he read shit. And there's every time you ask Park, he kind of talks about the that last league game is at home against Kerry, I think, and
Yeah.
seems to be a target they might have in their heads for that. Um, so yeah, I mean, from an injury perspective, there, but that's Paul again. That's a credit to Galway. Like, you look at the difference. The players I would look at: Robert Finnerty, Sean Kelly, Robert Finnerty, Sean Kelly, and Shane Walsh. So you finish 2024, and you've got fairly serious concerns about the injury record of all three. And Galway get a new physio in who is bringing some of these lads to his own house, like putting unbelievable hours into getting them right. And you see the three of them come back now, and they just look really sharp. And they got a serious bank of work done in their preseason, got a proper preseason, which is vital. And that's standing to them now. So I mean, it's funny. Like I keep laughing. People are going on about the new rules and all the injury record. And it's like Galway was way worse last year. Like way worse. Maybe the new rules are a thing that's having them all right. But no, definitely, like it is a credit to them that they have gotten the players that they need to get right, and that the squad is looking as healthy as it is.
Here's something I'm going to do. I'm going to name what I think the Galway Championship 15 will be. And you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. So, obviously, in goals, Conor Gleeson, full back line, Johnny McGrath, Sean Fitzgerald, Daniel O'Flaherty, half back line, Dylan McHugh, Sean Kelly, Liam Silk, midfield, John Maher, Paul Conroy, half forward line, Killian McDade, Matthew Tierney, Keane Darcy, inside Robert Finnerty, Damien Comer, Shane Walsh.
Do I agree with every line there? I go through it one by one. So a goalkeeper will be very interesting. The
Yeah,
fact that, and again, we're talking on Tuesday. Like if that, I think a large portion of the conversation that might have come around that football review committee review will be about the goalkeeper in the 12v11, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's changed. And if it is changed, it has drastic implications for some teams who've invested. Like, can you imagine the hours Armagh have put into working 12v11s? And it seems
yeah.
borderline cruel that that's going to be pulled on them now. But I don't think it would have as big consequence for Galway. They just go back to doing what they did all of last year, and it would be relatively fine. But if it doesn't change, unlikely. But if it doesn't, I think it's a very interesting conversation.
Is the
Um,
debate changing there? Flaherty, do you think he's now beginning to challenge Gleeson and there's real competition starting there at the minute?
yeah, I mean the fact that he's getting a chance now is really good, and I mean I think it is worth stressing. He probably had a couple of he tried a shot in his outside of his left at one stage, and you could just see that I don't know was everybody on the line that impressed by it, uh but it's still really early days. Like this is his first start since 2022. Yeah, like 2022. So I mean, hopefully he gets a couple of more chances, and there would be a all you want is depth in that position. Like a proper competition would be really encouraging. Two great options there. Um, I thought you saw, I'm obviously going to say this, I suppose you could say, I thought you saw at the weekend why Sean Fitzgerald has played as regularly as he does. When he's not in the fullback line, things tend to look a bit looser. I think what you want in that line now is different to what you wanted previously. Like you just need really extraordinary man markers who are absolutely alive to it in a bunch of different stretches. And I think Sean fits the bill there. So I agree with that. Uh,
O'Flaherty, McGrath, cornerbacks.
yeah, I agree with both of those as well. Daniel Farke's been absolutely phenomenal this year. Like he kind of a weird one in that in my mind, especially for Sotil, you associate him as this rampaging forward wing back who is well able, capable of attacking, and you're not necessarily going to see as much of that if he's in the fullback. You see a bit of it, like you still take his chance when it comes, but not to the same extent. Um, I agree with your half back line as well, and I agree with your I agree with your midfield. Uh, their front six is going to be so interesting, and because because of the nature of kickouts now, Galway tend to love going long as well. But you really need monsters there, and Galway are primed to make the most of that. And that's why there are lads who are like, you're going to try and have to work really, really hard to be a break ball expert if you're not a monster. Like that, I was looking at a guy like Carl Sweeney now, for example, at the weekend and thinking that's where you need to find your niche. Like you need to be if you can't land the ball down on top of me the same way you can as Keane Darcy, but no more than Paul Galvin before him, I will be an absolute menace on breaking ball. Now he's very important in terms of how he comes up and down the pitch and he works incredibly hard. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think in that regard, Keane has the jump. I think definitely. Um, and
Yeah.
then I mean the three
Keen
boys
Darcy, Keen Darcy, Tierney, and McDade, and then finish with
and Kenny
Cormac.
McDade. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like all three. And then the three inside, there's Uh, I mean, that's it. If you can get I actually taught this up before the Ireland final last year. Can't remember it off the top of my head, but I was stunned at how little they've actually played together. But if you can get them all fit and on the pitch at once, that's brilliant. And then, I mean, the depth you have behind that is absolutely sensational. I think it was great to see Keane Hernan back at the weekend for argument, and he'll certainly kick on and push hard to get in there. So yeah, I mean, but I mean, as we sit here now, I think I agree with you.
I didn't think you were going to have us. I'll take that. It's a question that's come in, Morris, and it's probably one you won't like to answer. But someone came in with a question. Adrian Cormack in here said, "Should Hernan be tried at full back? Lack of physicality was a big issue there versus Tyrone." But
He's a deadly man marker. He's played there before. He marked Andrew Murnan in Carrick on Shannon against Armagh a couple of years ago. And when he was this kind of pocket knife when he came back against Dublin, but he was marking as well in the quarterfinal last year as well. So he's more than capable of it. I do think Keane Hernan going forward is deadly. Like he's really, really good going forward. And I still think his long term position is midfield, like is in the middle where he has kind of trust his instincts. But the blessing and the curse for him is he's a pocket knife. He's so versatile. He's probably one of the few players in that Galway team, no more than Coswini, as I said earlier. You'd say I'd probably trust you to play in every single line. Like I
yeah,
there's yeah you have an element to fill in here everywhere. And I mean Paul the elephant in the room here. Like you don't even want to go there after how last year went, but the as great as it would be, the prospect of that 15 that you've mentioned all being fit for a championship game is still quite remote. So you're going to need guys like that to be capable of filling in things. So I mean, if Keane was playing fullback, I'd have absolutely no fears that he'd be more than capable of filling in there. But I think I'd probably say the same thing if he was 6 or 8 or 9 or 11 as well.
yeah. Is there a few players like that that you feel need to find a position in this Galway team? Because there is certain examples of some players in this team where maybe their versatility can come against them at times.
But it stands to them too, I think. Like Sean Kelly is in this regard for me, and that another guy who like if you look at the thing that won Galway a lot of games last year, I would actually argue that it is their versatility. So it is the fact that they started against Dublin and they were in trouble and their wing backs were tearing into it. Sean Kelly gets injured and they're able to get creative and you know suddenly I think Mashi was on one wing and they swapped that up so he wasn't necessarily doing as much tracking and got in right back into the game. And Keane Darcy came on that day and was brilliant. They're playing against Donegal. They start Liam Silk on Ushingall, and it's not necessarily working. So they have to leave it right. We'll push Liam to six, and we'll bet Johnny McGrath back in as our man marker inside there. So they have the ability to mix that up that way, which is what you need. Like you absolutely need the scope to do that. No more than Paul Conroy playing at full forward at the weekend. Thought it was a very interesting thing to see, and I expect it's something we might see more of down the line as well. So I accept your point. Like, I absolutely accept your point that you there maybe are guys who you're what is your absolute number one best position? Do we necessarily need to know that? For them personally, maybe, but for the team, I don't think so. Like, it really helps the fact that they're versatile enough to play in all those that Sam O'Neill could play in midfield, he could play in the half forward line, or as it turns out, he can play in the full forward line. A lot of guys like that is not a bad thing to have.
Do you think the midfield partnership could switch to Darcy Mayer and Conroy to be further on this year?
Well, I like it because he's not going to burn his legs as much, and he's one of the best shooters that Galway have. So, do you want one of your best shooters to burn his legs to the same extent? Maybe not. So that's from that position. That was the perspective I was looking at it at the weekend to see. This would be interesting that he's not going to have to. Paul Conroy is not going to be getting mauled in the middle with Brian Kennedy and Conn Kilpatrick, two absolutely awesome midfielders himself. Like, he has the scope to be come into the game and get on the end of moves on the outside. And it wasn't his most accurate day from outside the arc, but the fact that they're trying to work that is definitely an encouraging thing. So that's the aim of the game now, Paul, is can you get your shooters in an ideal position under very little pressure as much as possible. And I think that's why they're doing a lot of what they're doing at the minute. Plus, another thing he does, like he's a really good focal point. So when he actually did win the ball, he was involved in McDade's second point. He won it and popped it out. But then he's how do I phrase this delicately? Like, Paul is some man to win a free. Even if the free might not necessarily be there, he'll still win it. So he actually won the free for Shane Walsh's 2-pointer in the first half as well. So I can see, and I mean, as underage, he would have a load of experience playing the forward line too. So I could absolutely see them going with something like that for sure. I could see Kenny McDade maybe going into midfield if you want
Yeah.
a real kind of transitional option who's going to be absolutely up and down. And I mean, athletically, there's a lot of players in the country that would struggle to stay with him. So I think there's
Probably was McDade's best performance of the year at the weekend, was it?
yeah, brilliant. And I think again another testament to a guy who they're trying to get right. And you know, if he has a small bit of a knock, I think they didn't even take him to Derry. They left him home and let him take that weekend off, and then he goes back in and kicks 2 points. And I mean, that is really, really encouraging. So, I mean, that's another plus in the column for what they're doing in terms of getting lads on the pitch.
Isn't it mad to think like we're here on March 4th talking, but this week is actually going to be massive for Galway in terms of getting work done when you consider there could be a well, there's definitely a Kerry and Dublin game coming, plus the league final and plus New York in the next few weeks for them.
Yeah, no, I don't think the schedule is as bad for a couple of different reasons for Galway as it is for like but the greatest respect in the world, like the Donegal getting to a league final and then having to play Derry a week later is
Yeah.
very, very difficult. Galway can manage, they play the game at the weekend, they can go for a few points in Quins and Tuam last night and kind of take it easy and build into the Dublin game. And there's not the same pressure around that Dublin game now either. And then, I think they fly, if they were to make a league final, which they're in pole position to do right now, I don't think they're flying out until the Thursday before the game, which is on the Sunday. So I mean, it's not the worst scenario in the
Yeah.
world, really. Like, you could kind of make a virtue of that you're up in Dublin, you're going to win a league title, and then you're rolling into championship, and a good way of getting lads down on the grounds. The way they used that London trip last year as a bit of a training. Well, not it wasn't a training trip. They obviously had a game too, but they made the most of their time away, basically. And I would expect them to do that again. So, no, I don't think that. I think the schedule is pretty good for Galway. It kind of gradually, you can start to racket it up week on week now. Like Dublin in Croke Park, they need no focus for that whatsoever. You've got Kerry at home. There could be league final on the line there. You roll into a league final. Championship starts. Get over New York, and then you're looking at the Rossies, and it all builds really nicely. So they can make the most of the schedule that they have right now.
Just on that, then, like talking in terms of a league final, Galway win against Dublin, they're in the league final then regardless.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, like you're looking at the teams who they could play. Like, there's teams who could end up kind of falling into a league
Yeah.
final without necessarily wanting to be there. I worked the Mayo Kerry game on Saturday, and I was looking at it after. Mayo are playing a Derry team who are on the verge of relegation next, and then they have Donegal who have zero interest in making a league final last. Like, Mayo could absolutely end up in a league final without necessarily wanting to to be there. A team that a lot of us were tipping to get relegated. Um, so if Dublin win next weekend, they're back on the path to do it as well. So I mean, I think the teams that wouldn't mind making a league final are Galway and Dublin, definitely. They wouldn't have an issue with it. In which case, it might end up being that is at your league final. Um, but in saying that, I mean I, it's a real bugbear of mine that we're in this situation that what is the best structure we have in intercounty football, we're talking about who necessarily wants to win it. Like I just if there was
But
a way.
isn't this like ludicrous? Like because even what happened 2 years ago with Mayo playing the league final and then playing the Rossies a week later, like, and there was nothing changed, and that was 2 years ago, and now we're back at the exact same situation again.
Do you see, John Fogarty had my colleague in the Examiner had a column today. I thought it was an interesting idea. People are, and I am one of them, staunchly defensive of the split season. And so, are you going to push things back out to get an extra week for the league finals? Not necessarily sure. I don't want to get rid of league finals either because they're the best competition. And why are we getting rid of league finals to rush into a provincial championships, which can often be underwhelming? Like if anything is going to give, I think it should be the provincial championships. So if we're in this bind where you can't change the structure, you can't change the calendar. Could you change the structure where the league just becomes sevens? You make five divisions. You'd have seven. You'd have one less game in your actual league, but you buy an extra week at the back end of it. So the league finals are paid, and then you give yourself 2 weeks into championship. So most teams have three, the winners have two. All it means is you have one less game in the league. Is that really that big a deal? Is that not the best scenario here? We follow Hurlin's lead, go to five divisions, and you've made the gap you want.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Something people probably haven't mentioned too when it comes to football as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the more I think about it, I think it's the best option. It's the best option. Give it five divisions and give teams that live it. Because you like as you mentioned that Mayo like if I actually worked both of those games when Mayo got in the league final and then they lost to Roscommon a week later, and it was felt like Mayo were being punished. Like it genuinely for winning the league, it felt like they were being put up to that just we're absolutely primed to be to got at there, and that's just not what it should be. Like it shouldn't be that. So if I think a lot of teams, if you gave them the 2 weeks, they would go full blooded for it, and we'd make what is still the best structurally the best competition we have even better.
Goy rotated the squad a bit, but then brought on Dylan McHugh and Keane Darcy at half time. Do you see them rotating the squad again against Dublin and Kerry in these final two games?
Well, I think last time I spoke to you, I mentioned to you that I think there's lads who kind of deserve their chance and are starting to get it. So like Brian Mannion, that
Yeah.
was his debut at I think at the weekend, which is kind of a cool idea to do that in Tuam as well. But there's a guy who absolutely deserved his chance. His club form merited it, and he got it. And I expect him to get more of it again. I think there's players like that if we, fingers crossed, we see Sam O'Neill back relatively soon, and he kind of gets a chance to kick on again. Guys like that you would expect to see get a bit of exposure, but they're very good at other than last year, and that was by necessity. One thing I think, if you're getting your chance, like if you're playing in a line with other experienced lads, it's way easier than if you're in a completely experimental team and trying to make your own. So like for example, it's a lot easier for Jack O'Neill to line out if he's got his clubmate Paul Conroy and Robert Finlay alongside him, as opposed to if it was three new lads and you're all trying to make your mark, And I think they're very good at that. It's not, it's not wholesale change, but it is just Conor Farty comes in and he might be playing with a experienced enough defence in front of him, or Jack O'Neill comes in and he's playing with a couple of experienced guys beside him. So I'd expect to see them maybe do something like that. Like if we're talking about Brian Mannion for argument's sake, he still starts, but that doesn't mean that Paul Conroy and Shane Walsh don't start inside too. That's the way that they seem to be going after it, and I think it's the fairest way.
There's players as well. I think people forget that we haven't seen it all. They've just been the non-talking subs for most of the league. Like you look at Rory O'Connor's coming from Tuam, Jeremy Kilcommons, players like that, Sean Kane even from Caltra, Billy Mannion, like that. They just haven't been able to get their chance, and that's obviously down to how competitive the panel is as well at the minute.
Yeah, and there's always development or not development. There's always internal games as well where
Yeah,
you're gonna. It's not like they're not playing any football. Like they will get their chance to stake claim there. Same as every county. I think Mayo are playing Kildare today or tomorrow, and there's a couple of big names coming back for them in
But
that kind of
imagine
category.
these players who haven't played will be let back to the clubs now for the club league this year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in fairness, other than again last year, and that was by necessity, they've been very good for that. I often ring up the game, Barnard's first game in Division, the year they got promoted out of Division Two. They played Carter Strachan out there. Sean Fitzgerald was released, and he was marking Keen Darcy, and it was like that was a perfect test for him to prove that he was, and eventually he used that to work his way in. So yeah, you would fully expect that. But I mean, Parker said it. He repeatedly says it that he sees the value in releasing lads back to their club where they can. And there's a lot of lads there who, the worst, that kind of purgatory. This I don't think it's going to happen in Galway. It does happen in other counties now where you're in an inter-county setup, but you're not necessarily playing any football. Like you're not only you standing still, you feel like you're going backwards because everybody else is playing games around you. So you would fully expect as the a couple of extended panel lads to be released back over the next couple of weeks.
On the whole, where do you feel we are, Morris? Because we're probably a bit guilty of getting very excited at the minute, but we want to kind of draw it back as well after what happened last year and the heartbreak over the last 3 years. But where do you feel Galway are at the minute?
No, well, fans should get excited. They should like that. This is why are you? I absolutely detest the. It seems like a big thing in the Premier League at the minute where you're like, no, the celebration police. Like, don't get too carried away after every single. Like, what is the point in sport if you can't celebrate the small moments along the way? I don't think anybody was walking around the tomb on Sunday saying, "Geez, I must book the City West tonight." Like that. That's not where they're at. But they should be allowed to be encouraged that the form is good and that they are moving in the right direction. I'd be adamant enough about that. And I'm like, it's not. Do you think for a second they're getting carried away inside there and saying, geez, we're flying, like this is there for us. Like Galway know better than most where they're at. So I don't think there's any sense of overexcitement or anything like that as well. In terms of where Galway are, they're exactly where they were last year. They're a very good team. And as Shane Walsh said to us when we spoke to them afterwards, what they did last year was good, but it wasn't good enough. So they do have to find a bit more. And they seem to be actively trying to find that bit more. And that's all you can ask. Like we're at the end of the day, we're still talking in early March, and we could have a raft of change coming down the tracks again very soon. And sure, then you don't know how teams are going to react to that. So for where we are right now, I think Galway are in a good place.
We did very well, not to mention rule enhancements
Yeah.
so far throughout the podcast. But I think it's Thursday now. Is Thursday when the decisions are coming, or Thursday when they're going to meet?
So this is a three-stage process. The FRC met twice in person on Friday and again on Monday. They'll send recommendations to the Standing Playing Rules Committee. Then the Central Council will vote on Thursday, and from that we should have but Jim Gavin was adamant he wasn't calling them changes on Morning Ireland this morning. So we'll call them recommendations, tweaks, whatever you want to call them. I do expect we'll see a few. Like definitely, this is without any insight whatsoever. But I reckon, especially after the weekend, that 20-second limit on kickouts will be expanded out. That you'd be less penal about that. I'd say that might be a there might be a bit of a dulling around the edges. Like, will they be as harsh around the three up breaches or some of the disciplinary stuff? I wonder maybe are they the ones that you'll see change in terms of the actual enhancements? I'd be surprised if we see like a radical difference. To be honest, I don't. I mean, I know some people are for against the kickouts or for against the 2 point arc. But I'd say it's too early to change those ones. The big one is that 12 versus 11 Paul. That's going to be the one that it's the one that I'm most against. I mean, I think we've seen ample enough evidence now that sure, some teams are using it to be attacking, but a lot of teams are using it to milk the clock and to be slow, controlled possession, and it doesn't reward a team who wants to press, and we should be rewarding teams who want to press. So if there's any significant change, I reckon it'll be that one.
So do you limit then the goalkeeper to have to stay in goals?
I mean, I'm not making friends anytime I suggest that, and I don't think that's my idea, but I don't think it's going to happen. What I think they might do instead is rather than calling it a 3-3, they call it a 4-3 and include the goalkeeper in that. So what it means is that Michael McMullen, Gaelic Life journalist, actually, I saw him, he put up a couple of good suggestions on Twitter earlier today, but this was one of them. So which that effectively means that goalkeepers can still come up, they can still attack, whatever they want, but it's 11v11. So if they're up there, a man will be marking them, and you'll have to be able to beat your man. So if you have a Ethan Rafferty, or if you have a Paddy Dunnican, or if you have a Sean McNally from Fermanagh, or a Conor Flaherty, they might still come up because they are capable of beating a man and scoring. But
Mm.
you won't see goalkeepers come up for the sole reason of slowing down the game, of being a pivot and being uber controlled and how they attack. So is that a win-win? I think it's pretty close. So there's an idea that, but look, I mean, I've seen a bunch of different stuff proposed. So somebody say, was it Peter Canavan? I think I was listening to Tommy Rooney earlier today, and he said Peter Canavan said one of the options they're looking at is that the goalkeeper can only receive a pass inside the 45. Somebody tweeted me to say the goalkeeper should only be able to kick the ball, that you can't hand pass it. So I'm sure there's loads of different options that they're looking at. But if of all the ones I've seen, I like the sound of that 4-3 the best.
Do you think there'll be a change on when you get the free of being able to bring it back out for the 2 point?
I think for the three up breach, maybe in that seems very penal. Whatever at 1.2 is an absolute. I
Yeah,
mean, it's a punch in the head. But I don't think. Maybe this is not what you're saying. I've misunderstood you. I don't think they should get rid of 2.3 like point blank, like as in if you foul
yeah,
inside the arc, because I just know like if I was involved in a team and that was the case, you'd flake them inside the arc. Like do not let them
yeah.
shoot a two. So who cares if you foul them and they get a one, but don't. So uh, for the three up breach, very harsh. Otherwise, leave it the way it is.
What did you make on Robbie Brennan's comments over the weekend?
I, I don't, originally, I mean, uh, I think criticism or feedback is so important in this process because that's how we improve this. Like that's what you do. You tweak as you go. That's fundamental part of this. So when I heard him first, I was kind of keen to hear, for example, we used to talk to Malik O'Rourke after the game in Tuam, and talks about the kick out, and he says, let me just float an idea with you here. Let's say you brought back the old kick out, just for argument's sake. If you brought back the old kick out, does it actually stretch the pitch in that teams would decide to press up? Sure, some teams would go short, but the risk of losing the ball close to your own goal is massive. So they won't always go short. But because there'll be bodies up there, it creates more space in the middle. So instead of kicking along every single kick out to a box and a big fight for a ball, you would actually see more high fielding. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but like if you brought back the short kick out, it would lead to more high fielding. Because if when they go long, they're going to a 1v1 or a 2v2, and then they're more likely to try and catch a ball as opposed to break it. Like it's an interesting idea. You listen to him and he makes a very reasonable point about that. You listen to Pork and Pork will talk about the communication issues and he's bang on about that. Like that is something that needs to be looked at. So those ones I think are in fairness. But so park that for a second. Like I engage. I want to hear from managers. I want to know what they think. The stuff they want to improve. I think that's part of it. But what I'm arguing is that we've lost the essence of Gaelic football. That we're not seeing the core element. That's what he said. It's no longer Gaelic football. It's a joke. They've made too many changes at once, and they've lost that fundamental element. And I categorically disagree with that. Like the games that I'm at, the stuff that I want to see in Gaelic football, the stuff that I associate Gaelic football with, I'm seeing. So I'm seeing technically great tackling. I'm seeing great kick pass, like some of the kick passing in the Galway game. Paul's one to Jack O'Neill was brilliant. Peter Hart's ball to Derek Hanavan was a sensational pass, like an absolutely unbelievable pass. I'm seeing high fielding. I'm seeing long range shooting. I'm seeing a lot of things that I myself associate with Gaelic football. So I do not agree with that point, but he's completely entitled to make it. The one thing I think so that's what he said in the LFM Empire stuff. Then he went and talked to RT and he brought up some of the inconsistencies. And he said at one stage, we have foam in this game. We didn't have foam in the last games. Like, come on. Like, is that where we're at? But like, is that really the most important thing that we're taking away from this game, whether or not the referee has foam? Is it that vital as we talk about the change of the sport? I'm not so sure. So that one I didn't have as much truck with. But I go back to that core idea we should be hearing from players more and I think it would really help us
Yeah.
understand where we're at. It is good to hear from managers and to find the bugs in the system and to work them through. All of that it should be welcome. So I'm not against the spate of criticism that came out over the last weekend. I just think that everybody needs to kind of come at it from a reasonable perspective, and I don't think it's a lot to ask for that.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting now to see which ones stay and go for the championship as it does evolve. But just before we do actually finish up, Carstrangie are actually running a fundraiser. I'll get the details here now. This is ahead of the New York trip obviously coming up on the first weekend in April. So Calistran GA are running win a VIP trip to New York. So the first prize is a €1,500 Aer Lingus voucher or 1,500 spending money and 4 nights accommodation. Second prize is two GA season tickets for whichever county your choice. And third prize then is a GA jersey of your choice. It's €10 each for a ticket. Then you can get 4 tickets for €30 and 6 tickets for €50. And the link is on the Calstran GA social media channel. So that's how you can sign up for it, for their fundraiser. And all proceeds there will go to the Calstran GA Development Fund. So best of luck to them with that. But that is all we do have time for on this evening's podcast, Mars. Thanks a million for coming on.
Thanks, Paul.